How forgiving your spouse minimizes anger in your marriage. Hi, friends. Welcome to Marriage Realities, a comprehensive relationship channel. Today's video is all about the valid reasons why you should forgive your spouse. Two people from diversified family background unite in a marriage bond. So, there are bound to be differences of opinion between them. You too will face differences of opinion with your spouse, and many relationship problems will creep into your married life. Time and again, your spouse will hurt you in many ways. You too will hurt your spouse in many ways. Your spouse will do many things which you do not like, and you will do many things which your spouse does not like. You cannot hope for a relationship which does not have arguments and fights between you. It is very natural to have arguments and fights as a package of your married life. Do not give too much importance to the minor tiffs that happen between you. Because if you do so, you will definitely feel that you have married a wrong person. Do not take a magnifying glass to look at the faults of your spouse. When you do so, you will find many qualities in him or her you cannot digest. Do not take the arguments and fights you have with your spouse too much to heart. If you do so, you'll never be able to forgive him or her. What sort of a behavior makes you feel that you can never forgive your spouse? When your spouse degrades your family, when your spouse insults you in front of others, when your spouse neglects your emotional needs, when your spouse treats your presence as though you did not exist for him or her. Such unwanted situations will make you feel angry and resentful against your spouse. But you must forgive your spouse for the hurt he or she inflicts on you. Because unless you forgive your spouse, you cannot have a moment of peace in your married life. You should understand that a relationship without fights and hurt does not exist anywhere in this world. And a spouse who does not erupt in anger does not exist anywhere in this world. It is quite normal for your spouse to utter hurting words against you. This sort of situations happens in almost all marriages. You might love your spouse intensely, but you cannot avoid such situations arising in your relationship. And it is quite natural to feel resentful and bitter against your spouse. Many a time, the hurt he or she inflicts in you is a little too much to bear. You must forgive your spouse to decrease the bitterness you feel against him or her. Unless you forgive your spouse, your anger about him or her remains embedded in your mind. Do not also keep remembering the ugly scenes that happen between you. When you do not forget your anger against your spouse, it turns into acrimony against him or her. Your acrimony against your spouse makes your relationship highly hostile and volcanic. Even an ordinary conversation between you turns into vehement arguments. It is because your stored bitterness erupts as volcanic anger against your spouse. This is a wrong way to live your married life. Your spouse is not your enemy. You forgive your friends. You forgive your colleagues even when they rub you the wrong way. But it is strange that you find it impossible to forgive your spouse. You make your anger against your spouse that intense and that concentrated. When you forgive your spouse, you can forget the hurt he or she inflicts on you. And you could have also avoided many unwanted situations happening in your married life because of your unforgiving nature. You should not treat your spouse as an enemy who should never be forgiven. It is natural to feel angry when your spouse inflicts hurt in you. There is nothing wrong in feeling angry with your spouse. It just shows how human you are. But do not allow your anger against your spouse evolve as bitterness and hatred. When bitterness creeps into your marriage, it will be difficult to hold your relationship together. Make your love for your spouse intense and real. It is then you will understand that the ugly display of anger of your spouse was situational and momentary, and that your spouse loves you with the same intensity as you do. But do not refrain from talking about your hurt with your spouse. You should convey the hurt you feel to your spouse. You can definitely ask an explanation for the unwarranted behavior of your spouse. but accept the apology of your spouse without rekindling the bitterness you felt against him or her. Do you know how a marriage survives in spite of the fights and arguments that brew up between couples? It is because couples forgive each other for the hurt inflicted. If there is no forgiveness in your relationship, you would certainly drift away from your spouse. So, the longevity of your marriage literally depends upon your mentality to forgive your spouse. Yes, forgiving is the foremost aspect in marriage which will give long life to your relationship with your spouse. What will happen to your relationship if you do not forgive your spouse? In your bitterness against your spouse, you want to end your marriage. If you take your arguments and fights with your spouse too much to heart, you will never be able to forgive him or her. When you do not forgive your spouse, you will forever feel unhappy in your relationship. When you do not forgive your spouse, you stop communicating with him or her. When you stop communicating with your spouse, your relationship with him or her comes to a grinding halt. You do not share your emotions with your spouse, as your resentment against him or her is still vivid and raw within you. You might remember about a world leader who cheated on his wife. It was a sensational news those days. Many thought that his marriage has ended. But the world leader's wife proved everyone wrong by forgiving her husband. When the world leader's wife forgave him, she had in fact saved her marriage. With many years having gone, I'm sure she would now have forgotten the emotional pain she felt at that time. This is what forgiving your spouse does to your marriage. It saves your relationship from traveling to a divorce court. When you forgive your spouse, he or she feels bonded to you with more love. When you forgive your spouse, you liberate him or her from the shame and guilt he or she is undergoing. Your marriage is a relationship which has such minute threads woven around it. Many unique qualities hold your marriage together. Forgiving your spouse is one most unique quality your marriage cannot do without. Did this video make you understand why you should forgive your spouse? Marriage Realities will have many such relationship eye-openers. Subscribe to my channel to understand your marriage in a new light. Press the bell icon for updates about my latest relationship videos. Make love forever until death do us part your relationship goal.